one of the very first things in the Texas Family Code, because the Texas Family Code talks about family, it regulates family, and in Section 1 it talks about marriage, but in Section 1.003 it talks about the suit for the dissolution of marriage. Now it hasn't even told us what marriage is, but it says the suit for the dissolution of marriage includes a suit for divorce or annulment or to declare a marriage void. So there were three different avenues to declare a marriage void. My approach is going to differ from theirs. Rather than starting with divorce, I want to start with marriage, what the nature of marriage is. One of the questions that I think we need to look at is marriage religious or is it secular? And the church takes marriage very seriously because God takes marriage seriously. When we give our marital vows, who do we give them to? We present our marital vows to God. So, and I'm going to go a little bit further into this, but the state says, well, we want to take over marriage. So my question is, why not have marriage have both, accountable both to the religious aspect and the secular aspect, like Christmas or like Easter. You have people that put up pictures, the nativity scene, others will put up Santa Claus. It's neither one, it's both. And there's a reason that I'm talking about this religious aspect first. So looking at it from a biblical perspective on marriage, if you go back to the creation, after creation, marriage is the first act in the Bible. In Genesis chapter 2, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Who officiated that ceremony? It was God who brought them together. Family was before society. Family was the first government, the first economy, the first workforce, the first school, the first whatever you want to call it. That's what family was. And that was brought together by God. If you look at it from the perspective of Jesus, Jesus performed his first miracle at a wedding in Cana of Galilee. He compared the kingdom of God to a wedding feast. He taught the permanence of marriage. And in Matthew 19, verses 4 through 6, his disciples are asking him, Jesus, can we get divorced basically for any reason, for no reason? Can we just get rid of our wives? And his answer was this. He said, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? And he said, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. They are no longer two but one. But therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. And I think this is a warning to our state, because when people get married under God, the state is now saying, well, we can separate you. What God has joined together, let no man and no government separate. The perspective of marriage from Paul is this, is that marriage is a mystery. It portrays the relationship of Christ and the church. Ephesians 5:32 says, the mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. One of the last events of the Bible is what? The marriage supper of the Lamb. In Revelation 19, verses 6 through 7, the marriage of the Lamb has come, and the bride has made herself ready. So we've got to come to the conclusion that marriage is a religious institution, and if you don't want to believe that, at the very least it has a religious aspect and religious significance. This is also reinforced particularly by Catholic and Orthodox teaching. So the Catholic and Orthodox perspective is that marriage is created by God, and this comes from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. A lot of this stuff has already been talked about in the Scripture. The intimate community of life and love, which constitutes the married state, has been established by the Creator and endowed by Him with its own proper laws. God Himself is the author of marriage. Marriage is a one-flesh relationship, as Jesus said and as Genesis said. The Lord Himself shows that this signifies an unbreakable union of their two lives by recalling what the plan of the Creator had been in the beginning. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Marriage is a sacrament, and this is very important as well, because if it is a sacrament, it is a sacrament of the church. Now, the state would like to say we need to have separation of church and state, right? Well, what is the state doing then dictating to the church what a sacrament can or cannot be? And this comes from a place where it says what's awesome about the sacrament of marriage is that it differs from the other 6 sacraments in that it existed before the inauguration of the new covenant. And then the sacrament of matrimony signifies the union of Christ and the church. This is a sacrament of the church. Marriage is also considered an indissoluble covenant. And again, this is important because a lot of times we look at marriage as a contract, and marriage is a contract, there's no doubt about that. But the church sees marriage as being more than a contract. It is a covenant. Our marriage is supposed to mirror the covenant of God, which is irrevocable to us. If our marriage is a microcosm of our marriage to the divine bridegroom, so is ours. So the conclusion is this: marriage is religious in nature. Being and staying married is part of the religious duty of people who are either Catholic or Orthodox. The church takes marriage seriously because God takes marriage seriously. You can make the case too that the state has a purpose for marriage, and the institution of marriage in every known society is the socially approved and preferred context both for sexual activity and childbearing. Why is that? Marriage attaches mothers and fathers to their children and to one another. This is the essential public purpose of marriage, because without it, we wouldn't need marriage as a social institution at all. There's no need for marriage except that marriage is that which binds a father and a mother together for the sake of the children. We are not just animals that have kids and then abandon them and make them, rear them up on their own. So in the Texas Bill of Rights, and this comes from our Texas Constitution, Article 1, Section 32, it states that marriage in the state shall consist of the union of one man and one woman. The state or a political subdivision of the state may not create or recognize any legal status identical or similar to marriage. As such, marriage is exempted from the powers of government and violate. And that's part of Article 1, Section 32 and Article 1, Section 29. Marriage is recognized in the Texas Constitution, in the Bill of Rights. There is something special about marriage that the Texas state government is saying we are acknowledging marriage as something special. And under Article 129, to guard against the powers of government, the transgressions of the high powers herein delegated, we declare that everything in this Bill of Rights, which would include marriage, is accepted out of the general powers of government and shall forever remain inviolate, and all laws contrary thereto or the following provisions shall be void. I'm sure that there are other people that have different ways of interpreting this. I'm not an attorney, but I'm just stating that marriage has a very special place in our Texas Constitution. And when you look at the Texas Family Code seems to have a lot to say about marriage. For example, look at the formalities of marriage. The marriage must be signed by the person obligated by the promise or agreement in writing. You have to have a marriage license. And as one person said, if it's really illegal to get married if you don't have a marriage license, so the state, you have to apply to a marriage license to the state for a marriage license to get to be married. And I'm not sure if that's completely true that way, because there are informal marriages as well, but you do have to have the formality of a marriage license. You cannot have a forbidden marriage. You have to have proof of identity and age of each applicant. After you have the application, you get a license. The clerk can be guilty of a misdemeanor if they screw up this part. It also tells us that marriage has something to do with children. You must get married before the license expires. You must have an authorized person conduct the marriage. Just not anybody can conduct the marriage. You have to have an authorized person, and the marriage license cannot expire. There must be a waiting period. There must be no discrimination. There's a penalty if the marriage license is not properly returned to the state. There's a penalty if the marriage is performed after the license expiration. The marriage is valid even if some of the formalities are not met. But even for informal marriages, there are some formalities that are required. They must declare that they are married, and they must register with the state. They must provide proof and identity, certificate or declaration of the informal marriage. So why does the state demand all of these formal obligations or formalities? To somehow give marriage a special status. My contention is this: regulating marriage creates a duty to protect marriage and its participants, because marriage is not just a private thing. It is something public. It is a public good that the state wants to protect. That's why all these formalities exist. The state regulates marriage for the public good. Regulation implies an obligation to protect marriage as an institution. We know for a fact that divorce destroys a family. With unilateral divorce, the state has stripped marriage of any legal protection. And I'll get into unilateral divorce in just a minute. By adopting unilateral divorce, I believe the state is derelict in its duty to protect marriage and children, as it declares its duty is. Because if you look at the Texas Family Code, Section 1.101, every marriage is presumed valid, and there are reasons for this. In order what? To promote the public health and welfare, and to provide necessary records, and to provide stability for those entering into the marriage relationship in good faith, and to provide an orderly determination of parentage and security for children of the relationship. It is the policy of this state to preserve and uphold each marriage against claims of invalidity unless a strong reason exists for holding the marriage void or voidable. So is insupportability a strong reason? The Texas Family Code says, unless a strong reason exists for the state, the marriage should not be voided or voidable. What exactly does insupportability mean? Insupportability, if you use insupportability as a criteria, basically you have destroyed all legal protection for marriage. The institution of marriage is a sham. Institution of marriage is merely a registered cohabitation. If there's no protections, why even call it marriage? Why give it this exalted status? It's just telling the state, hey, I'm living with her, she's living with me, whatever, and we're registering with the state. Divorce does not preserve and uphold marriage, but it destroys a family. And again, I would say that the state is derelict in its duty, and it's liable if it's not protecting marriage. And I think that if you do not protect marriage, the state is lying about the whole marriage issue in itself. So in the Texas Family Code, the Texas Family Code tells spouses that they have a duty to support each other. One of the things that happens with insupportability, my question is, does the state have an obligation to investigate alleged non-performance of the duty to support, or remind the spouses of their duty? Because you have a duty to support your spouse. And yet this idea of insupportability, then to me, would say that this needs to be investigated to find out, to perhaps reprimand a person, not just grant divorce on demand. The state has a compelling interest in marriage, but I do not believe it has a compelling interest in divorce. It has at least not made the case for its compelling interest in divorce. Again, divorce destroys not just marriage, the institution, it destroys families, and it is contrary to the public policy of the state. By supporting unilateral divorce, the state has provided umbrage for the family destruction industry and those who profit from it. The idea of no-fault divorce, that is a marketing term. No-fault divorce is putting lipstick on a pig and hoping it turns into a princess. No-fault divorce is saying divorce for any reason, for no reason, you can make up a reason, and yet it goes completely contrary to what the Texas Family Code says. No-fault divorce is in opposition to the Texas Family Code. The traditional view of divorce was that, going from marriage was a lifetime contract between two parties. Now, and if you go to Texas, I cannot apply for a marriage license for a 1-week marriage or a 2-year marriage. Why is that? Because the understanding is that marriage is permanent. It's for a lifetime. So to the best of my knowledge, not just Texas, but no states provide a temporary marriage license. There is the presumption of permanence, contrary to the issue of no-fault divorce. But the interesting thing that I find is that a temporary marriage would actually give more stability to the marriage than unilateral divorce. Because unilateral divorce can take place at any time without any notice, for any reason or for no reason. Marriage is supposed to be exclusive between two parties. In the past, traditionally, to get a divorce, a breach of the marriage contract had to be proved. Only an innocent party could sue for divorce, and one could defend against divorce action by proving that the plaintiff had breached the contract as well. No-fault divorce does away with the traditional view of divorce. It actually incentivizes bad behavior. And this came from Herbert Jacob, The Silent Revolution, the Transformation of Divorce. In all states, and he's talking about adultery in particular, it doesn't have to just be adultery. In all states, the adulterer has just as much standing to sue for divorce as the innocent party. And evidence of misbehavior may not be introduced in divorce hearings. Even if the innocent party objects, no barrier exists to their getting a divorce. And in most states, there's no penalty attached to adulterous behaviors. When a couple's property is divided, decisions are made about alimony, and the court determines who should have custody of the children. The concept of fault has been completely banished. The idea of no-fault divorce creates the idea of impermanence. If you can get divorced at any time for any reason, it goes directly against the traditional view, which says marriage was considered to be permanent. So there was a reason that it could only be dissolved with difficulty, because it was supposed to be very difficult to get out of it. It was a lifetime commitment. Marriage was a very serious matter that had a public ramifications. I also believe that no-fault divorce creates numerous injustices. It violates the federal and state constitutions in multiple ways. It violates property rights. So, for example, a judge can order you to sell your house to pay your spouse's attorney bills, even though she or he has been the one suing you for divorce for no reason. I believe it's a bill of attainder. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. It definitely empowers divorce attorneys. If you look at the divorce attorneys and their websites, you'll see a lot of things that they talk about. Divorce, you need this professional, that professional. They make a lot of money off of divorce. The unwritten rule that I have heard about among divorce attorneys in California is that you can take up to 40% of a family's assets and they won't come back and try to shoot you. It'll hurt them, but they'll still kind of feel like, well, maybe they've come out of it, it was rough, but whatever. It enables divorce attorneys to pillage families financially. I know of people that have had college funds for their children drained as an attorney transferred the college funds for children from that child's account to his or her own children's account. Yet refuses to assign fault. This is very interesting because in Charlotte Bradshaw testimony, she says that judges don't want to assign fault for the sake of the children.
99% of the time, nobody's going to admit the fault. Most of the time, if you have a divorce trial and there has been adultery or cruel treatment, the courts don't grant it on that ground because they don't want that shown to the children.
In other words, what she's saying is judges willingly lie in courts because they think that's the best thing for children. The judges don't like to do this, so they will lie about it. Divorce victimizes children. Divorce hurts children. No-fault divorce. Divorce often, for no reason, even hurts children more than fault-based divorce. To go back to God's perspective on divorce, God hates divorce. He basically says, the Lord was a witness between you and the wife of your youth, to whom you have been faithless, though she is your companion and your wife by covenant. And then he goes on further, what does the God desire? He desires godly offspring. There is something about marriage and family that produces good outcomes, by and large, for children. And then God's final perspective is, I hate divorce, says the Lord, the God of Israel, and covering one's garment with violence. And if you look at that, that's basically bloodshed. When you are divorcing your spouse, it's as if you are slaying that person in cold blood, and that blood is coming upon you. And that's what you're wearing when you go into court, this court of bloodshed. The marketing of no-fault divorce. So no-fault divorce was supposed to make divorce nice and easy and clean, and supposed to be, we're supposed to get rid of ideas of collusion. We had to manufacture reasons for divorce. It would get rid of bitterness. It would create the good divorce, the amicable divorce. It would reduce expense. It would make divorce cheaper. It would make divorce more acceptable, socially acceptable, by removing the stigma of divorce. These are some of the purported goals. It has failed at every single one of them, except possibly the stigma aspect of it. Divorce is still very expensive, perhaps as expensive or more expensive than a fault-based reason. There's a lot of bitterness involved when a person gets divorced unjustly against his or her will. And the collusion, talk about perjury in family courts. Perjury is rampant in family courts, and it is never punished. So the idea of collusion, manufacturing reasons, now we manufacture lies before the courts, and the courts never investigate, and the courts never punish for perjury. The divorce industry is a big business, and this came from a divorce attorney site. No-fault divorce, joint custody, domestic violence laws often require difficult decisions linked to less precise legal standards. Yes, less precise legal standards is exactly the case. One might say almost no legal standards. Family courts are now busier and provide more services than ever. And here's the lipstick on the pig. Here we're telling you all good things that we do. Additionally, a large number of private professionals now advocate for collaborative and interdisciplinary dispute resolution approaches. And he listed 3 different ideas. A mediated divorce. A mediated divorce was to solve legal disputes. And typically, mental health professionals or lawyers are involved. And typically, it involves a number of sessions over a period of time. This all means money, big money, to these people involved in the divorce industry. Now we can also have a collaborative divorce. And this is an uncontested divorce, full disclosure, you're reasonable, you're working together. The collaborative divorce usually involves a team of very highly paid professionals who are very happy to do work to drain your financial accounts. An arbitrated divorce. A supposed neutral third party who's not a sitting judge presides over a hearing and makes an award. Or people alternatively can rent a judge. The arbitrators do not need to follow the law. The rented judges do need to follow the law. What is common to all three of these types of divorces is that there is no defense. Once the petition is given, there is no defense. The predetermined outcome is there will be a divorce.
There's some legal anomalies actually with the process of no-fault divorce. It's short circuits due process. It's really the only legal maneuver that we have that doesn't allow a response, that doesn't allow a defense, that does not allow some kind of answer to keep whatever legal action is being taken from happening.
So that's why I go back again and say unilateral divorce is forced divorce. No-fault divorce is the dissolution of a marriage that does not require a showing of cause. Unilateral divorce means only one party has to be in agreement with the ground of the divorce, if there is even a ground. Unilateral divorce means one spouse determines to terminate the marriage without the consent of the other. For all intents and purposes, the Texas Divorce Code is the 21st century version of Vladimir Lenin's divorce code. And when you go back to what happened with Vladimir Lenin, when the Bolsheviks came to power in 1917, they regarded the family like every other bourgeois institution with fierce hatred and set out with a will to destroy it. And Madame Smidovich, a leading communist and active participant, said to clear the family out of the accumulated dust of the ages, we had to give it a good shake-up, and we did. One of the things that they did, they put in unilateral divorce. That was one of the first things. This article actually came from the Russian effort to abolish marriage, the Atlantic magazine, July 1926, when divorce mattered to people. And then she also mentioned the opposition to the proposed law seemed to center around four main points. That unilateral divorce would destroy marriage. Well, it does destroy marriage. There is absolutely no legal protection for the institution of marriage right now at this point. It would destroy family. Well, it does destroy family. When you destroy marriage, you destroy the family relationship. You can have fathers or mothers kicked out of kids' lives. You can split up brothers and sisters from each other. It would legalize polygamy and polyandry. I'm not going to talk about this one right now, but I will go further and say that the fourth point is that it would ruin the peasants. And what you find with marriage is that marriage is one of the greatest things that helps to reduce poverty. The poor people actually benefit from marriage, but when you have poor people also, or the peasants or the simple people who think this is a good way out, that actually ruins and victimizes them and their families. So by 1926, to get a divorce, a spouse just needed only to register with the local Bureau of Statistics, and the other spouse would be notified 3 days later, by the way, did you know that you're divorced? Why don't we just go in the state of Texas to postcard divorces? Or maybe Starbucks could have a new business. Grab a Starbucks and a divorce at the same time. That's really where we're going to. What people don't realize is that the goals for the Communist Party, the U.S. Communist Party, and this was read into the Congressional Record on January the 10th, 1963, goal number 40, discredit the family as an institution, encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. Why is that? Because the family is the number one institution against totalitarianism. It is the greatest defense that we can launch against totalitarianism, socialism, communism. We must destroy and discredit the family if we are going to implement our communist ways upon a society.